The following story was submitted by Brian Morrow, and although the story does have some fictional elements, it is based on real events that took place in his life. Enjoy. I believe there are some things in life that a man should not have to see. Example: a friend of mine some years ago who came home to find his wife lying in the bathtub after putting a bullet through the roof of her mouth. Our little circle of friends whispered to each other rumors about how her father had taken his own life as well. It seemed to be some sort of comfort to us that maybe it was a matter of heredity. My friend was a sun-baked faced carpenter, a pleasant sort, whom I never would have imagined could have deserved the agony that must have gripped him. A few of us helped him move out of their apartment a couple of weeks later, when the crime scene cleanup crews and investigators had finished with the place. He and I were carrying a dresser from the bedroom when he suddenly stopped. I was backing up and almost dropped my end before I realized what was going on. We hastily set the dresser down, and I was about to ask him what the hell until I saw the look on his face. It was a pinched look, as if a single thought had locked up his mind. Something had caught his eye that had eluded the eyes of the police. The .38 caliber slug that had traveled through the wall and lodged into the baseboard of the bedroom wall behind where the dresser had been. He was calm and soft-spoken as he turned it in the palm of his hand and said something about taking it to the police so he could show them that they hadn't completely finished their job. I can't remember ever in my life being more at a loss for words. It was at that point I think I began to realize that sometimes things happen that cannot possibly make sense. It was an awakening for me, but looking back, I can only wish I had been able to shake that sleep out of my eyes sooner. The people here tell me I should be working through the things that have happened to me so I can process them. They make me sit through their sessions and listen to their lectures. They make me sit with the groups and expect me to talk about my past. But if I try to be honest with the details of what is happening to me now, everyone tries to distract me and get me off the subject by saying things like, I should try to remember it in terms of reality, or at least begin my statements with, I believed what happened was. Why can't they understand that what I'm telling them is true? I know what I saw. I know what I see. They don't believe me. But I really don't care anymore. It doesn't have to make sense to anyone. I will try to tell my story by writing it down if I have to. This way, they can't raise their eyebrows in their oh-so-concerned way. It's still happening to me. She keeps coming back. After all this time, even though I have managed to loosen her grip on the part of me that she has always owned, she keeps coming back. With us, it began as simple love and evolved into she and I against the world. We never really dated. We were just together from the day we met. The look in her eyes was deep and gentle. We talked about growing old together with a casual comfort. We were young and fresh until the day we both died. At least something died. Something within both of us. For her, the death was caused by a needle and a spoon. For me, it was caused by shock. I could not believe what was happening, and my disbelief cost me dearly. It seemed that one day I was living with a woman who was my wife, and the next, I was sharing a house with a dope fiend. One day I was her husband, and the next, I was as useless to her as any corpse could be. We went on together that way because we knew no other way to go on. We witnessed things in each other that seemed to have no human source. I would awaken night after night, hours before dawn, to find that she was locked up in our bathroom. The horrors of blood and torn skin and sicknesses of the mind. The utter madness on her face. What grim determination to destroy yourself. I can only guess at the fear I must have inspired in her with my explosions of rage and furious berating. My retaliatory use of her drugs upon myself, and my endless streams of suspicions and incriminations. Our once peaceful, passionate bedroom became a war zone of unholy passions. We warred with ourselves, with each other, and with the rest of the world. Peace was beaten senseless like the gouged and pummeled walls of our ravaged home. Love was scattered and lost amongst the shattered glass of the debris of everything we once had valued, which lay strewn on the stained carpet throughout the entire house we had bought together and hoped to pay off. Nothing could have been sacred to our poisoned minds. Not possessions, not beliefs, not love, not life. How the violence finally began to subside, I cannot clearly recall. My thoughts were too distracted and incomplete. It was like a storm finally blowing itself out, or like one's senses slowly returning after a car crash. My surroundings began to come back into focus, and somehow, I once again became able to speak to people I knew and to relate to the outside world. I realized that my debts were piling up, and I needed to find work. I had dug a deep hole for myself and had fallen in, but somehow I was able to stop heaping dirt on myself before being buried completely. As I began trying to dig myself out, I became dimly aware that she was still with me. Even though I was no longer her first love in this world, something within her still clung to me. After all the betrayals and torments we had poured on each other, we still were unwilling to let go. There was nothing left to rebuild. We half-heartedly began talk of starting over. The house was given over to the lien holder, and we left the little neighborhood where we had once planned to remain. The bond between us, although altered, was still intact, so we moved away together into a small one-bedroom apartment in an old complex. I landed a low-paying dead-end warehouse job. In order to get hired, I had to accept an evening shift. Money was very hard to come by, and we hoarded our own separate piles and hid them from each other. Our truce was fragile. Little skirmishes would break out and often become yelling matches. The core problems remained: her addiction and my self-righteousness. It seemed we could only keep the peace by not speaking, unless it was absolutely necessary. Time oozed and sighed along for some months in this manner without much improvement. This is the most difficult part of my story, the part about that night. That night changed everything. I came home from work just like any other night. She was not in bed, and the light was on in the bathroom. The door was locked, the same as always. I knocked, and she answered, in a voice that sounded like it came from a face vacant of expression. It sounded like a voice from the grave. She promised to come out in a few minutes. I knew it was a lie. She knew it was a lie. All these things were commonplace to the both of us, so I don't know how to account for what happened next. I can only tell it. I quietly unlocked the bathroom door with a tiny screwdriver we kept for that purpose, casually moving into the room and taking in the sight of blood-splattered countertop and mirror and sink and all the utensils required for that damnable act. I felt a calmness, like a caul covering my face. I watched from a distance as my hands raised to her throat. She sat perched on the toilet, so engrossed in the task at hand that she offered no resistance. She did not even look up from what she was doing as I squeezed the life from her. It was such a peaceful murder. Every day since, I long for the impossible. I long for the ability to reverse that gruesome act, but knowing I can never go back and change what happened causes within me a greater longing. Every day now, I wake up and wish without hope that the bond between us had ended that night. Here and now, so long afterward, I just want her to stay away. I want her to stop coming back. I stood over her and stared for a long time, then walked to our living room and sat down to call the police. Staring, unblinking at the door, I waited for them to come through it and take me away. I saw her again after they took me to the police station. She was in their little bathroom. They told me I could go if I needed to, and when I opened the door, there she was, sitting on the toilet, looking up at me, with bulging eyes set in deep, dark sockets. Her naked flesh sagged on her bones. Bleeding tracks crisscrossed up and down her arms and legs. Only her gaze moved as she followed my movement. I quietly closed the door without entering the bathroom and asked to be handcuffed again to the bench where they held me for processing. I didn't tell them about her. I expected they must have known she was in there, even though they said nothing about her. I thought it must have been some kind of cruel joke. My memory of the time I spent in jail before the trial is blurry. Day and night I sat and stared, speaking to no one. Eating and sleeping became nothing more than pure instinct. If they had placed me in solitary confinement, I don't think I would have noticed the difference. One day, I was made dimly aware that it was time for me to go to trial. A court-appointed attorney I had no recollection of ever having met before represented me, and I sat silent as my guilty plea was heard and my sentence pronounced. 20 years in prison. It was suggested by someone in the courtroom that I begin my sentence in a psychiatric facility. It took several more weeks of jail time for everyone to get the paperwork done so that I could be taken to my new place of residence, which is where I am now. She visited me twice during those weeks. One night, I awoke from a deep, empty sleep and found that she was lying beside me in my bunk. Her ice-cold body was pressed against me, her arms wrapped tightly around me. Her beautiful dark curly hair was tossed across my chest. Terror welled up inside me. Panic cascaded down through every process of thought into the deep core of my sanity. Somehow, I resisted the urge to wriggle out of her grip and did not move. Terrified that my cellmates might discover her there with me, I could only lie motionless. Slowly, she smoothed my skin with her hands. I could feel the blood on her arms as it smeared across my stomach and chest, while she tenderly caressed my face and neck. Her baleful eyes flashed into mine, and then followed the paths of her fingertips as she slowly and lovingly traced the contours of my collarbone, leaving trails like icy slugs crawling on my skin. Her lips stung my side as she placed small, frigid kisses there. I lay there, for how long I cannot say, with my arms draped across her in a thinly veiled pretense of her returning repulsive affections. An insane scream tried to fight its way past the clog in my throat. The best I could hope for was to faint from fear, or better still, die right there in her embrace. I think I must have fainted finally, because the next thing I remember is snapping awake in the morning. She was gone. I sat up slowly, holding the dirty wool blanket around my chest. I slipped on my shirt quickly, trying not to appear to be in a rush. I sat on my bunk until we were allowed into the showers. The dried blood on my chest and abdomen made my skin feel strangely tight in spots as I stood up. Thankfully, my baggy jail jumpsuit disguised my ugly secret until I could find a place in a corner of a shower room. I did my best I could to face away from the other men while I scrubbed at my stained skin. But I couldn't prevent the water from around my feet turning faintly red. The stains grudgingly faded, but the kisses on my side had left behind bluish marks that wouldn't go away. They looked like bruises. No one said anything about the red-tinged water or the bruises. Either they hadn't noticed, or they just didn't care. Either way, I was grateful not to have to answer any questions about it, and I continued to pass the time in that place as I had all along, speaking very little, keeping to myself as much as possible, and allowing days and nights to blur together like a dream sequence from a movie. The second time she visited me was the morning of the day I transferred to this place. I was awakened and told I would be going downstairs with the others from our cell block who had visitors. I couldn't imagine who might want to visit me. We were led into an elevator and through a hall, which dead-ended into a room with thick glass windows and booths with steel stools to sit on. I hadn't been told who my visitor was, so I wandered through the room, looking over men's shoulders and checking the empty booths for someone I might know, or who might be looking for me. Then, of course, I saw her. She sat on the other side of the glass, waiting for me to sit down. Her beautiful hair was held back from her face by a wide black headband. She was dressed pretty and smart, and she carried herself with an amused air, as if at any moment she might smile lovingly, or even allow a light-hearted chuckle to escape her lips. She raised an eyebrow as I sat down, and her lips pursed slightly, but she said nothing. I hesitated as I took in the sight of her in her sheer floral patterned short-sleeved shirt. I had always admired the way it looked on her, following her curves and enhancing the elegance of her shoulders and neck and breasts. Her bare arms showed no evidence of past ravages, other than the slightest hint of bluish lines beneath the pearl-white skin. The harsh fluorescent lighting caused her skin to glow with the pallor of a cadaver. Terror glistened in cold drops on my skin, but I faced her, and she faced me. The amused apathy with which she looked upon me made me shudder, but I forced myself to speak. "Why are you here?" She said nothing. "What do you want?" Her eyes pierced me through, but still she said nothing. "Look, I just wanted you to be okay. I wanted you to stop, but you wouldn't. I wanted you to stop hurting yourself, but I hurt you and I can't take it back. It will never change. Every time I think back, I see it happen all over again. I'm sorry. But that's not enough, being sorry. It can't help you now. I can't just keep on remembering. I can't. I suddenly realized that my face was pressed against the louvered hole in the glass, and that the fog from my breath was obscuring my view of her. She rose up to look at me over the clouded glass, and stood there just chastising me with that amused expression. Her movement was so fluid that it contradicted the stillness with which she stood. I found myself thinking how relieved I was not to be on her side of the glass. I believe she might have just consumed me right then and there with one breath. I started violently when a hand was laid on my shoulder. It was the guard. He said I had to go. The room was empty except for him and me. She watched us until the door at the end of the hall was closed behind us. My bunk welcomed me back into its folds. But of course I couldn't feel completely safe. After all, she had been there with me once before. Right after lunch was when they began the process of me out of the jailhouse and into this place. I thought I might have seen her once more before I left there, but I wasn't sure. There was a woman standing at the window where people from the outside came to put money into the commissary accounts for friends and loved ones that were inmates. The window was visible to me behind the bookend desk. The woman stood perfectly still with her hands on her hips and her chin slightly raised. The thick glass in the distance distorted my view, just enough to make me unsure whether it was her or not. She was still staring when they led me away in handcuffs and ankle chains. Now, finally, my little story comes around to the present, to where I am now. I think this is going to be my last night here, so I want to get finished with writing this before I leave. I think I'll stash it under the mattress of my bed, so it will be found soon after I'm gone. Until now, I haven't been able to really tell anyone about her. No one is willing to listen. There are some who have promised to listen, but before I really get a good start, their attention just trailed off until they would finally start going on about more treatment or more therapy or more drugs. But I don't want any of that. It doesn't help. It has not and will not make her stop coming back. After what happened this morning, I have become convinced that no one here can help me. I wish that they could, but now I am sure they cannot. I woke up very early this morning, long before morning bed check. My bladder was aching, so I got up to relieve it. This place is set up with several houses close to one another, where we patients are kept, up to 7 in each house. We sleep 2 to a room and share a single bathroom. As I slid out of bed, I could hear my roommate's steady breathing. Everyone in the house was still asleep. I stepped as quietly as I could, groggy from sleep. The bright lights of the bathroom assaulted my eyes when I flipped the switch. I shuffled to the toilet and drained my bladder with ecstasy. As I bent to flush, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. At my back was the old bathtub with its shower head and curtain. The curtain was drawn, and as I turned, it was lightly fluttering, as if something had tugged at it. My hand reached for it mechanically and slowly opened it. She wasn't there, but what was there gave me such a start that my breath was taken away for a few seconds. The bathtub was almost completely full of blood. Black clots and chunks of gore floated serenely in the thick, stinking liquid. Once I started to breathe again, I got a strong whiff of the sickening rot My stomach twisted inside of me, and I had to fight off the urge to retch into the tub. Then I was forced to realize I had been mistaken. She was there after all. Her forehead slowly appeared at the surface and pushed aside something nasty and black. She raised her face up and patiently allowed the blood to drain before opening her eyes. Her hair was matted, and from it, thick black drops dripped. She looked at me with peaceful forbearance. The slightest of smiles flashed in her expression. I was powerless to move. I gawked like an idiot as her hand broke the surface and beckoned for me to join her, and then she slid slowly under again. The gore received her and was motionless again. As soon as I could remember how to move, I reached for the beaded chain that was attached to the stopper. The blood drained ever so slowly, and at last revealed that she was gone. Not knowing what else to do, I set about cleaning the bathtub as quietly as possible. After making sure the door was securely locked, I grabbed my towel off the rod and took some cleaning liquid with bleach from under the sink. Time after time, I soaked the towel in blood and rinsed it in the running water. The more solid masses I broke up as best as I could until they went down the drain. My muscles ached sharply by the time I had finished, and my neck was stiff with fatigue and tension. I was sure it was getting close to time for morning bed check. I gave the tub one last rinse with a bleach cleaner and stuffed the stained towel deep in the laundry basket. Then I switched off the light and fell back in bed and into a black, dreamless sleep. I struggled to wake up in time for the morning walk we are required to take every day. The orderly called my name repeatedly, and I stirred very slowly. As usual, I did not talk to anyone as we circled the grounds in the morning light, but some people cast some long looks at me with concern in their eyes. I must have looked pretty rough. I felt terminally tired. After the walk, I sat on my bed waiting for the life skills class that would begin soon in the meeting house. All I could think about was how tired I felt, and her. I think of her minute by minute, second by second. I cannot escape our bond. She will not allow it. I don't know what she wants. She keeps coming back. I can't take this anymore. I'm going to go to her. Outside the fence, in the distance, I can see a freeway. She will be there. Somehow, I am certain of it. I know she will be there. Once I get through that fence, I will go to her. As soon as I finish writing this, I will head for the fence. I will run to the freeway and I will wait to see the little red car she drives, the one we bought together. I will wait, and when I see her car, I will jump out in front of it and make her stop. She will stop. She will be expecting me and she will have to stop. I will make her stop and pick me up, because I will not give her time to think about it. Then we will be alone, and she will tell me what it is that she wants from me. She's coming now, and waiting for me to jump in front of her car. I'm sure it's true. I have to go now. She's on her way.